Marais Planning Commission. All our commissioners are here. We could use one more, is that right, to make us whole? So if anybody is actually watching this, you should be here. So, come on down. All right, all commissioners are here. We have the agenda before us and our minutes. And I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
All right, Stacy has made the motion.
I'll second.
All right, thank you, commissioners. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on. So we have one big thing we're working on today. Obviously, this was on our agenda earlier, and so we've all kind of seen this a bit. I don't know how much, have you seen much of this, Anton, before you got your packet?
For
the North House variance? No. Okay.
but I looked over it a bit.
Okay, it seems on the face of it to be pretty straightforward. And obviously, we've had a presentation before.
Did you want to approve the minutes?
Yes, were they not in here? Oh, do that separately.
I just didn't know if you wanted to.
Yeah. Right. And approve the minutes. Thank you. Sorry about that. So I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I would motion we approve the minutes.
Thank you. And
I'll
do we have a
second that.
All
I'll
right.
second it.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Probably not. Let's move on to voting on that.
Aye.
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 Great, thanks. Sorry for jumping the gun. So yeah, in looking it over, it did seem pretty straightforward. Many of our questions that we normally ask are pretty thoroughly answered, I felt. I know that you and I were here for that presentation, whatever that was, 2 months ago. So I feel pretty good about this, but I suspect that you guys might want to offer some more perspective.
I'll hang back.
He's just going to throw
Keepers.
stuff.
Hi, I'm Greg from North House, and joined by Matt Neschheim, our facility director, and also by Bruce Cornwall with LHB, dialing in. He intended to be here, apologizes, but the weather slowed him down a little bit. Our intent in being here is primarily to just be available to answer questions. I think as we presented last time, obviously since when we purchased the dockside property, part of our aspiration was to think about how we would evolve our campus, obviously in alignment with the rest of the structures and businesses that are there. And turned out our aspirations to do that aligned with the city's highway project, which is a wonderful addition to community and changed our world a fair amount. Took away one of the driveways, which, that's a good thing, but how do we make it work is the question, and that's definitely what this variance is in part about.
Yeah.
Meeting the needs of 4 local businesses, allowing us to continue to move forward on serving students and year-round, and also keeping things working in the neighborhood. So, unless there's questions,
Yeah.
I don't need to say more than that.
Yeah. And, I mean, I guess I have some questions, but I'd be interested to see if the commissioners had any of their own that they would like to ask at this point. Stacy, did you have anything? I mean, I suspect you do. But.
Well, I always have questions,
I know,
but I was waiting
that's
my
why-
turn.
You're so patient.
Do you guys usually do it in order?
No, but
Okay.
he just knows I always do. He'd start, we should go down, somebody else should start sometime.
Yeah, you go. I've got
Okay,
a few things I'll
my
bring up.
very first
Okay.
question
Yeah.
is the stormwater management plan. Who
Yeah.
did that?
Stormwater's been managed by LHB, and it includes permeable pavers so that water can permeate, includes a water capture system that then pre-treats in a settling tank before it's exited into the lake, of course overflow in case of a really major storm, and then also built into the building will be a living roof on this north section to capture much of the water and treat it as well.
Have you run that by our local soil and water office? To get their
We've
input?
been in conversation with the soil, water, and the DNR around that, and also around shoreline stabilization there, adjacent to, an area that public traffic will only increase, but there's no formal process for that unless we ask formally for stabilization approval. So, so that process, is, I guess, so conversations underway would be the simplest way to describe it, Stacy.
Okay.
Commissioner, if I can add, this is Bruce Cornwall. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but in terms of having to ask because it's such a small footprint, it actually falls under the minimum area that's required to have those formal meetings to make it work. So we're addressing it with best management practices and discussing with the DNR about the best way to do. So to a certain extent, that North House is going a step beyond what they'd be required to do because it's such a small footprint.
Okay.
Okay, well, when I was reading the North Shore Management Plan and
Right.
the water, the setbacks,
Yep.
I didn't see that there was a size difference of construction making a difference to following that plan, I guess.
In terms of the stormwater management, obviously there has to be protection during construction. That's a different story. And that has to be reviewed.
Okay,
So, but great question. One of the things the DNR has said, until we've clarified with the city what the intent is, for instance, us working with them on shoreline stabilization stuff, they want you guys to decide if we can move forward with this or not before they're going to talk to us about some of the other elements of the project.
okay. So on your map here,
And which
Shown.
one? Which one are you looking at, Steve? Just, I want to follow one.
the very first little map showing, there's the black line, which, when I looked on the mapping on the county site, that looks like that's the 40-foot setback line. What's the red line? What does that represent?
High water,
That's the high water,
a
okay.
typical high water.
Yeah. And I don't think the black line is the 40-foot setback. I think that's the yellow line. Is that right,
Yeah.
Bruce?
Oh, the yellow, okay.
Yes.
not on
Yeah,
that
the black
map,
line is a
actually.
property line.
Black line's the property, red
Yeah.
is high
Well,
water.
okay.
Yeah,
yellow
and
is
technically, the
setback.
parcels go all the way down to the lake, but this is just the lines coming from the county, I think.
Yeah.
The dockside parcel goes, the angry trout parcel goes, the Echo property all goes down to the water. And then the property we rent doesn't, because the rec park controls the beach in front of the main campus.
Gotcha.
And so where are these two buildings going to be moved to?
Good, so North House is working with the Cook County Historical Society on repositioning, moving and finding a future home for the Scott Fish House where it can be restored and interpreted to the world, because right now it's hidden back behind, and down on a campus. So the exact location's still being worked on. It aligns kind of with their long-term planning. I know Matt sat in on some meetings with, like the Forest Service, things like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, nothing's set in stone yet for exactly where it gets moved, but with the Cook County Historical Society, we trust that we're going to come up with a good plan for that building.
When you have a historic structure like that, if you plan changes for it, you'd have to do what's called an historic structures report. That's been filed with the Minnesota Historical Society, and we until they've said check, we can't make any formal plans because they have to check that box before we move on to the next box.
And that was what well, do we approve this before that? And I was down there on Sunday walking around and I said, well, it's got the plaque on it, it's marked, so I didn't know the process for making sure we're not destroying a historical structure.
Sure. So the we're obviously so why are we asking for citing for this now? Well, because, for instance, you need to order things like timbers and panels and find contractors, all this whole list of things. And until this is a site where you can build. There's a bunch of other stuff you guys need to do, but you can build it here. Now get to the rest of the stuff. That we're asking for permission to cite so we can start to plan and put things in place. The other work, again, getting the HSR approved, working then with the Historical Society to look at options for moving, working with some of the historic architects in LHB have been giving us some advice about who to connect with to clarify the process for when you move. There are historic structures that have been moved. And there's a process for doing that and keeping them on the register. You have to obviously follow the rules. Although there's work we're going to need to make sure we do, eyes wide open. So that's part of the process, obviously, separate from this process.
If we don't give you the variance, there's no reason for you to go through any of that.
Correct. I mean, at some point, we've got to know we can move forward because there's a bunch of next steps we have to take, and that's one of them.
Right.
Would you add anything, Bruce?
Well, the historic structures reports and their decision, they're and I think you've got this. They're parallel processes. They're not sequential. They're not serial in any way. You could get historic structures full approval at any time to remove that at any time, regardless of what you put the building there, because you could still be behind the setback and still have to take down the building. Or you could push it forward to make accommodation for the other businesses, and you still have to remove it. So the historic structures report, regardless of your decision, is still something that's going to be preceded, down the path for this. So they aren't connected directly. Obviously, they impact each other, but
Yeah.
so you don't have to worry about one thing going before the other.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you. I'll be honest, I'm really nervous about this being so close to the lake. It looked like, really close to the water. And then in your explanation here saying that about the Highway 61 project affecting, this is part of the reason you need to do this. It's like, just put another check mark where I don't like that 61 project. I wish we would have changed that. I wish more people would have said, this doesn't make sense. So, but I guess that's all the questions I have for right now.
I'm not sure I have any questions, but I would say that and I think we all do, take setback requirements very seriously. We ask for, whether homeowners or other businesses, to follow the rules that have been set forth, and one of, the only way out of that I see is that you have to really prove some sort of a hardship. And as far as I can determine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the only real hardship is the size and the scope of the build relational to the size of the lot. And I'm not sure that I can support that. I feel like the building could be moved or it could be scaled down, or in order to get garbage trucks and snow removal, because that seems to be where the hardship was proven, right? Where you were trying to get, and there's a reality, they're good things to keep in mind. It's important to be able to get trucks back there, and it's important to be able to get snow removed. We all experienced that this winter, but I'm not certain that that really is enough for me to say, no, we've got a real hardship that we need to create a variance for.
Yeah. Anton?
I think wasn't here for your guys' initial, because I'm kind of late to the game on this, but in what I was trying to understand, and my company did some work on the angry trout this fall, and so we had to deal with the new ramp and parking, and even understanding the space between, like the fish house, not the fish house, but where North Shore Fisheries, is that their name? Where the guys are fishing out of that building, and the proximity of that retaining wall. You know, when I look at this site plan, and I'm not an engineer, and Bruce would probably, you know, well, easy to confirm that I'm not an engineer, but it seems like that space is that space from that retaining wall down to that front of that building is really pretty tight. And so if I think about that in relation to what that space is, and then look at the idea of being able to, even as this is drawn, to be able to like turn a garbage truck around down in that space, like this still is really, really tight, right? I mean, it's really, unless they back all the way in from the highway, maybe that's their plan. I mean, I guess that's not our job to figure out. But it does seem, I mean, my biggest question before this was kind of like, looking at like this kind of radius from that back deck of the Fisherman's Daughter to where the north side of this proposed building is going to be, like, we don't have any dimensions on this. Like, what is that distance? Do you have any idea? I mean, is it 40 feet?
I defer to Bruce on that one.
Boy, that's a good question. Off the top of my head, I don't. We have the diagrams showing the, did you see those? Was showing the radiuses of the trucks, how they would work to turn.
Oh, I see.
So.
Oh, that's what that is. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so, those are guidelines that, are kind of given in the industry for civil engineering to use. They're programs that all civil engineers use to kind of determine vehicle movement. So those show just two different ways, and you're right, it is a tight condition, even with the building in its current, current configuration, or we'd like to see it.
Yeah.
But it and it does work, but barely.
Yeah.
So to keep the garbage moving for angry trout, particularly it's very important.
So I think that's I guess one of my points, or one of my thoughts anyways, is that there already seems to be this somewhat of a restriction based on where the north side of the existing, not the two buildings that would potentially be removed or relocated, those two that are in this footprint, but where the existing building is next to the Angry Trout. What are those guys called? What's the fishing, the fishermen?
North Shore.
North Shore, it is North Shore Fisheries.
Yep.
Okay, so the North Shore Fisheries building there.
But that's technically a classroom for North House. The
Yeah.
fisheries actually operates in the
Out of the-
basement of Fisherman's Daughter,
Oh, they do?
formerly known as.
Okay,
House.
oh yeah, I guess it is in full. Yeah, I was in there,
Yeah.
yeah, this winter. But, I mean, I guess, so just, yeah, so the classroom, I guess,
Yep.
that building, if you want to refer to it as that. I just, yeah, I don't know, I mean, if you're gonna go through all this trouble, I understand that you wanna make sure that what you're building is the most appropriate use of space, and that it, accomplishes what you're trying to get through. But it also seems like the idea of like going so broad across the harbor face of that on your south wall, that to me is, you wouldn't have any problem turning a truck around if you didn't make your building so wide and you went instead taller north-south. Like if you change, I understand why you would want to have that expanse on the south side of your building, whether it's in design for, whatever, energy efficiency, solar, passive solar type of situations. I understand that. And also just the dynamic of why people are coming up here to do classes so that they can sit right there and stare at the lake, right? Like, that's awesome. But I also feel like if you didn't have that much impact running east-west, and instead you shifted your focus so it was narrower, similar to some of the other buildings on campus, well, now you have really no problem trying to make that turnaround with a truck, because it could come down and turn towards the beach. And from that stairwell now, that where it used to be the driveway on the west side of the Fisherman's Daughter, you have that clear sight line basically down from Fifth Avenue West all the way out to the lake, right? And it would create this more sense of, it would feel like there's more like kind of a place you could actually go down to the water, and for people, it's not a building that's kind of another building that's blocking off kind of beach access and access to Lake Superior and the harbor. And I mean, I don't know, I mean, either of those are going to impact and they're going to have a variance, but it seems like you could correct even in looking at if you could drive past this building and turn down there and make it like a T, so you could turn that truck around much easier, it seems like you'd have a much better situation. And maybe then your impact within this and what your variance ask would be, you'd still need a variance, but what your impact would be down into that could be lessened, is the way I, again, I wasn't here for your guys' presentation, but if I look at that, I know that in what I do, if I have to ask for a variance, which I've had to go through that process both with the city and with the county, and I know we're just representing the city right now, but it's always about resource protection. So one of my initial things was also, it's there's an order at which the resources are protected. It's always the lake first, wetlands, and then, side lots or setbacks off a road, right? Like those are not as important as the, natural resource protection of the lake and of wetlands. So this design, it forces it to be, the impact to be in the one resource that we're trying to protect the most. So it makes me happy to hear that you have Bruce and LHB involved in working with some sort of stormwater plan, because yes, there isn't like a like you don't need a stormwater management plan per se because of the size of this project. But I think it's crucial, if we're gonna allow this to happen, that is thought through, and if there's green roof, there's, catchment basins, there's those types of things, I think that's important. So those are, I don't know if there's nothing really definitive in that, but those are kind of my thoughts and what I got out of this, and me looking at it like, well, if, what is it's probably in here, what's the dimension of the proposed Harborside building?
It's approximately 40 by 80.
Okay.
Yes, and maybe I can just provide some perspective on, questions and why, why are we proposing this and things like that. And, at our last presentation, Mike was really clear to say, you guys can, we didn't dig into some of this stuff quite as much as we are, this is totally what this meeting is for. So thank you. This is good. What, in purchasing the dockside property was North House's aspirations? Well, we're a thriving school. People want to come here to learn, and universally, not surprisingly, where do they love to be? They love to be on the Grand Marais Harbor, like all of us do. And as we looked at how our campus needed to evolve, several of our classrooms, which kind of helped the school begin, are now too small. I don't know if any of you have been upstairs in our fish house, which was a cozy place for 6 people to learn together. We don't have a lot of 6-person classes anymore. It's not fully accessible, so we need to create a fully accessible classroom, because that's what this world needs, right? Similarly, the north end of the blue building, which used to be where our school store was, but now it's been moved up to the yellow house, a cozy little space, but you get in there with more than 6 people, it just doesn't work. And so what does quality learning look like? Well, it includes quality classrooms. And so where is that going to fit on our campus? And so, of course, we've looked to Dockside. We studied definitely a building oriented north-south versus east-west. Why is the building, approximately 40 by 80? Well, because we believe we need to have 2 classrooms, and the advantage of 2 classrooms adjacent to each other is one of the other things we do for our, as an organization with this community, is we host major or community events, the Wooden Boat Show, Unplugged, things like that, and you need big space to host events that gather big groups of people together. 2 classrooms next to each other where you can open a building up and make it available, whether you're dancing, whether you're having a boats to tool auction, whether you're having a featured speaker or films. That space becomes a really intriguing, really important resource for a school, but also for a community institution. So when we looked at north-south compared to east-west, there are kind of several considerations. One was, obviously, both classrooms next to the water was desirable. North-south doesn't allow that. Similarly, north-south doesn't allow for having solar panels, whereas positioning the building east-west does allow for solar panels, and in a sense, in alignment with the city of Grand Marais' goal to become climate neutral, that was a need that we saw as really viable. And it addressed also kind of a growing norm in that part of the community. There is a huge amount of pedestrian traffic that moves along the harbor, stopping by Angry Trout for lunch and being in line and needing to wander a little bit, coming by dockside, and now where am I going to sit down with my fish and chips? And so as we looked at, well, how do you make this space as permeable as possible to pedestrians? North, south, east, west, they play out differently. Never mind the dump trucks for snow, never mind the garbage trucks. And so, what we're presenting to you here is what we believe is the idealized outcome. And I was, I brought Mike Roth down to look at the site. I brought Jay Aerosmith DeCou down to look at the site. And I think, one of the things Mike and I talked about is, this part of the harbor, yes, the 40-foot setback is important to talk about. That said, there's a history of buildings being closer to the water rather than farther away in this part of the harbor. In fact, over time, but in locally, obviously the Angry Trout, Harley and Shelley Tofty built the steel building down closer to the water. North House's Fish House, also similarly. So there's a history of working with that setback, and one of the questions that they both had for us, for me, was, as you build this project, what are you going to do to make the site more accessible for the public to move along the harbor? Because you can move along the harbor pretty well through the rec park, and you can move along the harbor pretty well across North House's campus, but the zone from our campus over to the Angry Trout, it's pretty rough and rugged. And so, again, as part of thinking about, well, how does this fit into the greater goal of having of people being able to move around the harbor, that's part of also what this site plan aspires to accomplish. So, so I'm not sure that addresses directly your, I wasn't trying to address questions. I mean, you guys were sharing great observations, but I was trying to provide just some perspective and background on some of the stuff we've thought about as we've worked on the design, and it ended up, where we are.
Yeah.
Matt or Bruce, anything you'd add?
Let's see. You did a very good, great job of kind of giving that overall background. And as you pointed out, there's been a long process of exploring what works for everybody involved. And as you mentioned, we thought this was the right balance that we felt respected the character of the rightfully understood previous decisions to have buildings built within a setback because of the working nature of those buildings, and of course the aesthetic, which we'll be maintaining, is a series of fishing type buildings or building to make that work. The orientation, we did some pretty careful studies in terms of view sight lines, in terms of keeping views open, including sitting on the deck behind Fisherman's Daughter. Surprisingly enough, north-south or east-west, frankly, is not as big an impact as you might think, depending on future developments, et cetera. Even if, of course, the building were built inside that setback, you'd still have that same problem. So to a certain extent, we felt that this provided for an overall better experience for everyone who's involved. So we were, balancing those aesthetic things, the fundamental, kind of operational needs, and trying to figure out what's been done in the past, what's respectful for what we're trying to do as we try to be good stewards of the property, both from a business standpoint and ecological, because your point about that's exactly why we're doing good work with stormwater, is because despite the rules, which might say you don't need to, we still believe it's important to do that. So we felt as best we could say, it was kind of a win-win-win, as best we can for the businesses, the community, and of course for the school. One other thing is that we did master planning, and out of that, Greg mentioned those 2 classrooms that really underperformed. The idea, to a certain extent, that these are replacing that with, kind of 21st century expectations, plus the idea of providing the right size classrooms, and this potential for contributing to the community. Just like to underscore that was a very, very planned, kind of thoughtful approach to what this building needed to be. It wasn't, let's put a building down and make it this big because it fills the space. It was not, very careful. So very planned for and planful kind of approach.
Okay. Well, one of the things that, of the items that we need to consider that I always find a little bit difficult is when it comes down to the plight of the landowner. Like, why is this our problem? I guess is often the question I have. I mean, when I look at it, is it in harmony? Sure. Is it consistent? Yep. And is it reasonable? Certainly is. But, when I think about, when, like recently, yes, we let the Trout add a little bit more to their building. It was a little bit more. Really wasn't going to change much of anything, so that seemed fine, But this is going to be substantial. It's going to be a substantial building in that space. And I am just wanting to hear a little bit more to understand what happens if you move outside of that zone or you do something else completely. Because, I don't know. I mean, we're not building any more shore. And you're right. I mean, we've used it in different ways with these different buildings that are already down there. I'm just not sure that this is the thing for that. I mean, it's your land, but.
Can I think one thing that would be, to me, would be helpful. I mean, I know the things, the work that you have done and the improvements that you've made, either on the city property, but on the campus in general. And like, to me, I know that I think this is my first planning commission meeting, so I don't know for sure, but this is a lot of good information, but even something beyond like site plan to see, like, I mean, we don't, like, do we know what the overall height is on this? I mean, like, maybe you guys do, but have we been given that information? Do we have like like elevation views on things? Do we have, and even if it's not, I mean, that might not be exactly like, oh, here's exactly what it is, but even like simple massing drawings to understand what this is, to me, is a 3,200 square foot building is a pretty big building, right? And the variance that the Angry Trout got was on the opposite. It was on the highway side of the project, and it didn't really change the footprint at all. It just connected a couple roof lines. So,
Yeah.
but it still went through the variance process, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm not just, I mean, right, is that the variance you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think I'm grateful to hear that the thought and that there has been a lot of discussion, so I apologize if I just am missing a lot of things on this, but it would be helpful for me to know, like, what is this going to look like? How is this going to impact? I'm assuming that Bruce has the capabilities and probably already has some of that on there. Like, what is this rendering? Like, how does this impact what that view shed is?
So I'm sorry.
No, you're
I was
good.
going to say, we of course have that, in terms of what Mike said we needed to submit, we didn't include those things, but we have that. I can look and pull them up. If I could share my screen, you could see a rendering that we did that kind of shows it from Fisherman's Daughter.
I think it would be, yeah.
We also have, drawings we're working on, because the building is, kind of in that process where we're needing to move into it. So we can show you what it's gonna look like. Let me find that.
I mean, I don't know about the rest of you, but to me, like, because, I mean, so the other part of that is like, the steel building, that's your classroom now, that was Harley and Shelley's, I mean, there's nothing, it's a Morton building, there's nothing like architecturally dramatic and beautiful about that, right? But it was, you know, I don't even remember what was there or what that replaced, or that was a long time ago. And so, I don't think it's our job to necessarily like play like the critical role of like design review board here,
No.
as far as like,
No,
if
we're
we
not doing
like
that.
what you guys are planning on doing, but I think it's important for us in making this decision to understand what it is. I mean, I feel like that's my responsibility. Because if this comes through this, that means it's going to city council, and I would like to make sure that when we address the rest of the council on that for final approval, that if they ask the question like, well, what is this gonna look like? And I say, I don't know what it looks like. I don't really know how it's gonna impact the space, then that feels like maybe I didn't do my job here, right? So,
So
And
I'm
I
not sure, oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. I agree, I would like to see that viewpoint to understand how it looks on that property. I also would like to see it from the lakeside. I walked all the way out to the new boat ramp
Yeah.
and stood there and thought, okay, what does a big building look like from there when it's so close to the water and nobody else gets to do that? So if you have that, that would help me also.
So I can do two things. I can show you the image that I'll show now is what we would call a rendered image. It has color and it really shows it in a much more realistic. Then I have to find some of the studies we did looking at it back from the water. That'll take me another few minutes, but why don't I first share this? And if I can do that, can I share it, Patrick?
Yeah,
It'll come up on the big screen.
Do you see the icon? It's like a square with
Yeah.
an arrow. Yep, go for that.
Yeah. Okay. So right now, is my face on the big screen?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize that. Okay. Got nothing in my teeth, I hope.
You're good.
Let's see. Okay. So I think I've got it right. Share. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this, can you see this? You can see the image?
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is if you were kind of at the bottom, but between the Yellow House and Fisherman's Daughter, looking, and on the right, that's the old, what we call the Fish House, which was the house that is, right now has like food classes.
Has the
in the
kitchen
lower
classroom
level.
in it?
Yeah, it's classroom in the lower level, and then it's the upper one is that really small one. That's one of the things that we're replacing. And on the far side is the what we now call the boat barn, which is the who built that originally? Mark, please?
Harley and Shelley Tofty built it originally. It's a steel
that's right.
Morton building, but now it's used as a classroom.
Right. So and right about, if you can see my cursor, right about here is the fish house, the old fish house is stored there. But you can see that our roof line is respecting the existing ones. We have an 812 pitch roof, which is not, it's pretty, it falls in line with the character. It's board and batten siding, so it will look very much like all the other buildings. It's all going to be in wood, timber framed. And then on the entrance side, that we have some toilets, and this is that green vegetated roof, which when you're in Fisherman's Daughter, of course, you look down on that, and it's with daisies and other things should really be very attractive. Steel roof, and then on the non-lake side, we've got these monitors which are taking the north light for the classrooms. We have, as you can see, the idea is to pave it much like we do on the what we'll call the west side, using pavers. And as I think Greg mentioned, this is where we have the permeable pavers, where the water is collected, and as it moves down, through here, out in existing outflow, so we're not adding any outflows to the harbor. There's a settling tank, filtration, so we're actually pre-treating the water. So we're literally improving the water and quality in terms of what it happens right now. So there'll be less sediment and certainly less contaminants. So, we've been, quite proud of that. And hopefully, the idea of the green roof is another way we can do it. So, as you can see, this is the area, if you can follow my cursor, where the trucks need to come down and back in carefully to get over. Just to the left of the boat barn is where the, fish house, angry trout has always had their garbage. And that's the way that we can, get that out. So that was, from that point of view, and I can leave that up, I think, let's see, how can I do this? So I want to try to find those other ones, or can I
would stop sharing and come back.
I can stop sharing for this, but are there questions about this before I move on and try to find the other ones?
I just add, the aesthetic is much like the red or blue building. I mean, that really, both of those we see as kind of ideal classrooms for the school. Big open space, very natural connection to the lake in the sense of big windows. It also turns out that those windows serve visitors to the Grand Marais Harbor and to the community pretty well too, in the sense of people look in. This is stuff that they're curious about, what's happening. And by putting the big windows on the corners there, you actually, in a sense, make the corners of the building permeable visually, so you can actually see, in a number of places, see through the building to the lake. But it's a little bit wider. I think the red building, blue building are 32 feet, and this is 40. And it's a little bit longer because they're 70, and I think they're 70. Is that right, Bruce? I'm pretty sure they're 70, and this is 80. So therefore it's equivalently modestly taller because it's so.
Yeah. So generally it fits. Now, what I'll try to do. Well, any other questions? I'm sorry. I'm trying to.
No, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll stop sharing so you don't have to, as I'm looking for things on my screen here. Okay, so I think, and then I'll try to find the other image.
What about parking? Are you adding parking somewhere?
Sure. So so Kim asked about parking. We're conscious that parking is one of the needs. We don't have a concept yet to share publicly, but we know, one of our goals is to, clearly the Highway 61 project actually has increased the amount of parking in our neighborhood, but we see, our aspiration is to add additional parking if we can as well, so stay tuned on that.
We also envision parking as ideally not by Lake Superior either,
Right.
So moving parking away from Lake Superior is one of our priorities.
Right. I mean, in a sense, that is actually one of the things this project accomplishes. What's the history of that property? Lots of vehicles parking essentially right by the lake. And that's not a criticism of anybody, but it's a fact. And now, we're going to move all the parking away from the lake. Semi-trucks are not going to be pulling behind the building anymore. And instead, it's going to be a much more managed space. And so environmentally, some wins and some additional costs, but our belief is mostly moving in a positive direction.
Okay. I think I found one that makes some sense, that's enough of the progress to get it. Now, again, this is not what we would call a rendered, but it gives you the idea. Buildings are quite simply masked okay, bear with me here. I find my screen so I can share, sorry. Okay, I'm going to share now, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
Okay. So as you can see in this, it's more of a, we're playing around with the different ways of, the impact on the water. So it shows the one version of the solar panels, and then it shows a version of what the back of the building would look like facing the water with glass, as Greg mentioned, the ones that erode, if you will, the corners so you can see through, and also larger doors. These are actually going to be now double doors instead for energy efficiency. But the idea here is a very, again, simple facade that works with the fish house on this side, and this again is what we call the boat barn. These aren't rendered, so to speak, so you have to kind of imagine, this is the metal building, and then this is the kind of a reddish and natural weathered board and batten. And then this is the deck, not unlike the deck that's at the blue building. And then this is not exactly correct, but you can follow my cursor. The water comes right kind of like this. And then in this area here is where the rocks are for the riprap, for reinforcing the conditioned at water's edge. So again, I think you can see that the scale of the buildings all relate. We've been very careful with that, and the North House has been very clear with us from the beginning that it needs to fit in. This isn't this is meant to do a respectful building that reflects the character not only of the buildings on the site, but the community as well.
Right.
Okay. So seeing that, I guess I didn't really catch that tag on this. I was thinking that would be like built up, like impervious. So you're saying that is actually gonna be like wood frame structured deck on the side there?
On top, so as it drains through, it'll be what we would call permeable, right? So an open deck, so it's
Yeah.
right. So I have to clarify, the building is 40 by 72, or by 70. So that's, I kept going, my math wasn't right. So I said 40 by 80. It's actually nominally 40 by 70. Excuse me.
And so in comparison, like to the red building and the blue building are 32 by 70, just to offer some.
Right, yeah, the footprint here is about, for that, the massing is about 2,800, these are about 2,300. So they're that much different other than it's a bit wider. So, any questions about this? Again, it's not 100% what it sits at with today, but it's very close. We've got there will be double doors going in. That means these would go away, and we just have windows here. So if you can imagine these as double doors instead of four doors, and this being windows, which simplifies the facade. We thought this was a bit busy, that we think we've landed at a good place.
All right. Very good.
So is that okay?
Yeah, and we would have been happy to include drawings like this, so great that you've asked for them, and great, Bruce, that you had them. We didn't necessarily get signals that you guys want a little more information rather than a little less. I'm not arguing.
Someday we're going to teach Mike we want everything. He doesn't get it, we want it.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, and I think that some of that might have been presented whenever that was, 2 months ago. We did get more of that last time around, and so Ben and I were here, but yeah. So thank you all. How are you feeling about this?
Did we receive any
commissioners?
public comments?
I have one
Oh,
email.
a new one?
That, Yep.
Because everything else had been supported.
So I'll just read it down here.
Yeah.
Ready? This is from Don Boostrom. I'm a former resident who grew up in Grand Marais and have many family connections in Grand Marais and Cook County. For 23 years, my wife and I have been coming back to Grand Marais each summer for a few months because we both love Grand Marais and Cook County. So it is sad to see how the quaintness of Grand Marais and beautiful view of the harbor continue to be degraded bit by bit, one variance at a time. As examples, the angry trout was allowed to expand over the shoreline on more than one occasion. Later, Harley's Morton building, a very high structure, was built. Now another modern in quotes, building is being proposed to replace a historic fish house. If it is another high-profile building, it will further obscure the view of the harbor, especially from the former dockside restaurant. What good is a 40-foot variance if it is always approved? A better place for classrooms would be across the highway on the property the North House Folk School recently purchased. Instead, replace the fish house with badly needed parking, outdoor classrooms, or an outdoor eating area for the restaurant. Do something that enhances the harbor and quaintness of Grand Marais. Don Boostrom.
Very good. Thanks. Yeah. The other comments more supportive of the project?
I just have a question. How do the fish get from the shore to the building?
The fishermen, wheel the fish, on carts, but also drive their fork, in the fall, sometimes we'll drive their forklifts down, and the plan is laid out so that they can still do that.
So that's like from this dock between the buildings and the order?
Yeah, so they come from the cement dock. The cement dock is the one that looks like a little bit like a lollipop, right? And it's got 2 boats on it. And so you can forklift out onto that and you can come up. And actually the space between the 2 buildings is 15 feet in the new design, and I'm not quite sure. Right, is that right, Bruce? Is it 15?
That's correct. Nominally, it's 15 feet, so that we can get the forklift.
And if you look on the next page, Kim, you can see that pretty much aligns with. You can see where the outline in red of the Scott Fish House, and so it's essentially the same as the current width, which they say is more than adequate for their needs.
So, Kim, would you like to be on planning and zoning? Just wondering. I mean,
Curious.
getting some good questions out of this. This is great.
So let me confirm why we're here. Fair? So, when we bought this property a number of years ago, just to confirm, we did come to the city, not formally to the planning and zoning, but we came and talked to the city and said, we're buying this property because we want to evolve and grow as a school. And that's important to our students and our instructors in the world of craft. We like to think that's also important and beneficial to Grand Marais. We understand we need to do that in a way that's good for the community, for sure. So, that said, they said, yeah, there's definitely space where you can do this. There's been a history of working with the variance. That doesn't mean everything associated with the variance is approved. That's not what I'm trying to suggest. But we want to have a conversation with you as you look to the future. And we said, great, we'll buy this piece of property. And so we did. We feel really great about it. We feel really proud that, people, when we bought the property, said, don't you mess with my fishermen. Fishermen are still there. There's 3 fishermen, and we love having them as neighbors. They said, don't you mess with my fish market. Fish market's still there. That's a good thing. And similarly, we feel really lucky to have partnered with Angry Trout, figuring out how to, build a new driveway that could service both of us, sell them a parcel so that they could become a year-round business. We've been trying to do a bunch of things right. We've brought an idea to you that frames up and attempts to balance lots of things. How can we create quality space for students? How can we create a space that powers community opportunities on campus, community gatherings? How can we create space so deliveries and snow and garbage trucks, the things that make organizations work? How can we create enough pedestrian movement along the shore? How can we address environmental needs? Whether this is exactly the solution you want to endorse or not is obviously a question that we've brought to you, and we're not trying to rush that conversation. We're here starting the conversation, and so that's the key thought I want to share right now. And we're more than happy to gather other info you need, to have conversations, to walk the site with you. I don't know how, quote unquote, what the rules are for talking, but obviously I want to be in conversation, because like you, I'd rather take something to the city of Grand Marais, to the city council, and say, here's the way we should move forward towards the future. That's what, I'd much rather take that to the council together, right, than something else. So that's what we're here for, just to confirm. And so, great questions, great comments.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, well,
But I think legally, we have to make a decision within a certain number of days, don't we? At least we do in the county.
well, I
Maybe
mean, we
the
can.
city doesn't follow the same
I believe it's
rules.
60 days from the request.
Okay, so.
So we got, when did we get this request? Was this,
I'd have to get back to you on that.
okay, yeah, just,
I'm pretty sure
I
it's,
just want to
wondering, I
make
mean,
sure
I-
we don't.
I think it was 2 weeks ago,
okay.
This
Okay.
date's February 25th. for
February
whatever reason.
15th. It says February 15th.
on your
Okay.
application.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, because we submitted it, and then the meeting got moved.
yeah, okay. So, there's some pressure, not huge. We can come back, and talk about it again if the commissioners are feeling that way. I mean, when I'm looking at our findings, what do we have to figure out? I mean, I'm feeling pretty clear that we're getting into the ballpark of it. I don't want to get into the micromanaging of it. We're not going to go and tell them how it should look. But, I also feel like we weren't there, but a lot of things have sort of moved in that area and have grown in that area. And to me, this does seem like it doesn't seem unnatural for it to happen. I am a little bit hesitant because of where it is, in terms of that setback. I mean, that is, where and when do we say no is a good question. And I'm not sure in that space that it's clear what that answer is. But I'm, tending to feel like this is something that, at least in the broader scope of Grand Marais and Cook County, is probably a net benefit overall. But I do have some questions about those sight lines. I mean, that does definitely close off that back there when you're walking along. So I'm kind of hesitating on that edge to say like, oh yeah, for sure. But I'd like to hear from the rest of you, if I see where we're feeling we're at. Sounded like you weren't so hot on that one.
No, it's not like it's not even close to the setback, right? I mean, we're blowing it out
Yeah.
by 20 feet plus deck, right? I mean,
Right.
the deck is gonna be over high water mark essentially, right?
Right. And I think, yeah, I get you, Ben, I'm with you. But I also look at, where we have, one of the things we try to do is have some continuity so people know what's happening in their world, right? And, we look back to the precedents before us, what did other people do? What other planning and zoning city councils do in this regard? And there is a precedent for it. It wouldn't be crazy unusual to do. So, like what Greg was saying before, I mean, that's totally reasonable that he would think he could do something in that zone, with that property. And we don't have to, do it, but that wasn't an unreasonable expectation for use of that property. But I'm still balancing things. Anton, or?
Do you know, I don't know, I mean, there's a couple points. There's very few locations in the city of Grand Marais where when we have a variance request, it involves a setback from Lake Superior, right? So if there's a nervousness about this setting some sort of precedent, like where else are we talking about? Like the city owns everything off to the west.
Yep.
Everything is already, to the east of this, right, is already built
Right.
out, right? And the council approved that, you guys must have approved a variance for over at the old Eliason house on the East Bay, where there was that little building, they must have
Oh,
rehabbed
yeah, right,
to see the sauna place,
yeah.
right?
But they
Not
didn't- they
changing
didn't-
any footprint at all, right?
Yeah.
Just
Well,
showing
and
up.
I don't, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't remember, I just remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm thinking of like, okay, so like, let's think of
It
what's
was an
within the
existing-
city limits that is actually within our purview of
Yeah,
making, what this would do, right? Like, what is that potential for future? I don't know, again, because I haven't had to deal with this in the city side, that are our county side, overhangs, decks are inclusive of that. So it's really, we're going to like a 0 lot line setback on this. But I don't know, I'd have to read through, maybe Kim knows, or Patrick, but if decks and like overhangs are considered in that setback. So, again, it's gonna require a variance no matter what.
right.
But me looking at that is, at least on the one kind of colorful drawing, is like, oh, okay, here's the new riprap, which is cool, you guys are working with the DNR on that, and then that could be more of this block, like you're gonna do in the turnaround area and stuff, and then it's like, well, wait, if that's a deck, like, I don't know if that's better or worse, if it's like, but it's right there, like Ben was saying, right on the, I'd almost be more nervous, whatever, you guys are looking at it. I mean, being like, there's a break wall right there, the chance of, but
Wow.
there's a, so those things, like if you don't want to have to go through a variance, when you're talking Lake Superior outside of city limits, your deck can't be 40 feet, right? And so the fact that not only is the building within, but the deck is like right on that historical high water mark, or whatever the old W, what that
And our,
abbreviation
and to
is.
confirm, our siding of the deck there was to make that part of the,
I think that's great, like accessible.
very accessible
I mean,
and,
so that's my-
whether that's, right, that was the goal.
No, and I think that's great, because that's like what I brought up the first time about that kind of sight line and that connectivity, and it's not anything against North House at all, but like, I feel like we have access, we have a small amount of, we have access at the rec park for folks that want to, and we have Coast Guard Station for people that want to interact with the shoreline. We have the East Bay, right? But there is a lot of kind of exciting things that happen, like you say, people that are waiting in line at the trout, waiting in line at the dockside, or whatever it is. And I feel like there already is, unless you know that you can walk around down there, it does feel like it's not really part of the community. Like, it does feel like it's private. It doesn't feel like it's, like, that's my, and I know it's not, but I don't like that, but it doesn't feel like, and maybe you guys see people just wandering around and it is feel open, right? But it feels like, oh, this is a thing, and it's a business, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to wander around. So I feel like if there's this like kind of continued, I don't know, I don't want to say like, because again, you're gonna have to ask for a variance if you did change what all this stuff about keeping these kind of openness to the lake, and I understand, it sounds like, of course you did, went through all the different iterations on what makes the most sense for your property and for what you're trying to accomplish with it. I appreciate all of that. And I don't know, so I can kind of argue at both points, like, I don't see how look at the picture above Michael's head, right? That's in setback, right, with the sailboat, and that was done at a time when there was absolutely no standard or even forethought to like what you're doing and how you're building to protect the resource. And what North House is doing is reaching out to try and understand. Right now, it's a gravel driveway. So the way stuff is right now, if we'd have gotten rain, instead of snow, the top 1.5 inches of gravel, that's soft and frozen underneath would have
Right.
ended up in the harbor.
Right.
If they're willing to spend the money to put down pavers like they did in the rest of on the city-owned land where the red and blue building is the initial portion of the campus, that is a huge impact on what ends up in the harbor and what, the negative impacts of that. So I don't see necessarily what they're doing in the way that they're doing it being a detriment environmentally and to the harbor, to the lake. But it's more I guess, the making sure that I don't know, maybe I've convinced myself that it's okay, because again, like maybe there's other spots, but I don't know, can you guys think of any other spots where there is private land that goes right against, whether it's the harbor or the lake? I mean, I guess maybe there's some stuff, a couple houses out by the.
Oh, right, yeah.
Towards
There's a
the,
couple, we have quite a few that could.
right.
But that, I don't think we should
We
be
can't.
looking at what may happen. We need to look at this project and base our
Yeah.
opinion and our vote on this project, not what might happen later, or what has happened before. Yes, that did happen before.
Right.
And there's a reason it doesn't happen anymore, because I think we were all taught that's not really environmentally friendly. So, seeing that's what I have been learning over the last years of my life, of learning to be more aware of what's good for our environment, what's not. And then I see this go right down to the lake, and I don't know, that was a red flag for me. There's either a reason we have a 40-foot setback or not, and I am all about thinking about variances, that maybe not in every situation that makes sense. But removing the whole 40-foot variance here, I don't know. To me, it just seems like too much. And without saying that this whole project and the way this is going to affect the whole area, right now, I can't support it this way.
Yeah.
But
Can I-
North House is good.
I'm not receiving anything negative, just to confirm. So,
I think that-
just can ask for clarity?
Yes.
So, are you saying you're opposed to building anything inside the setback? Or that it's just that with the deck and the building set as it's proposed, it's basically eating into all the setback, and that's where you feel like we've reached too far?
That's my reaction when I see this plan, the way it's presented. I'm like, that's just. We've given variances before, but we've never said, okay, there is no setback, none. And I'm like, ooh, that's a little drastic for me.
I think of, the experiences that I can draw is that there is the step to the variance process is working through, and again, it's maybe because I wasn't at the earlier presentation, or I haven't, because why would I be privy to all of the different design concepts and the different discussions that you've had with your architects and engineers, but that showing that to show that last kind of burden, right, which is that
Right.
piece, really shows like you need to demonstrate how, like, what other solutions what other things or shapes or items did you come up with? It's not maybe super important, but I can think of like a project where it was a really, really funny, tiny piece of shoreline that we're gonna have to get a variance to build. It's not in the city, but even in that process of how that design happened, once we realized the postage stamp that we have to try and fit the house on, then we couldn't just take a rectangle and plop it down on here and say, we could plop that rectangle down and say like, yeah, we need a variance for 50% of the footprint that we're trying to put in place. We could make that ask. But to me, what efforts did we go through to try and minimize what that impact is? you know, I see that what you're talking about with vehicle turnaround and those types of things, like that makes sense, but I don't see anything in this that shows, here's what we did to try and minimize what our impact into that setback is, right? It seems like, I mean, even if you stayed within the envelope of what those old buildings are, right? I know you're pretty close, but like, would it work? Would it work if you were, I mean, what if you were 8 feet narrower instead of, you know, I mean, I don't know, I mean, and that's part of the process to me that I see, like, if you need to show, if you want to show that it really is an undue burden on you, then like, what are these other concepts that you tried, or thoughts or layouts that you did that it doesn't work? Because then it's like, oh, you tried these different things and this doesn't work, so it is actually an undue, it is a burden on you to not be able to use this space. But and I'm not saying you didn't do that, but we don't really have that, so what I see is like, this is kind of everything that you'd hope for, and it's just right there, and it's, you know, you're making good steps, you're doing the right things, but you're still ultimately putting 50% of the footprint, if you include that deck, of your new structure completely within. So it isn't like, oh, we tried everything, but to even make this buildable, we need to take this corner, we need to do this little bit, and it's gonna be an impact of 6 feet, 8 feet, whatever it is. But we're talking 22 feet, you know, plus, all the way across, that's an impact. And what does that do if you shifted back so the north side of that building lined up with the north side of the boat barn? Does that work? I don't know, but that's gotta be a 10-foot offset, so now you're just cut your ask from the setback in half. I don't know what that model is, but that's not my job, right? Like, and maybe it doesn't work then, I don't know, but like, to me, that's, it seems like going through those steps and those processes, which again, maybe you have, I don't know that, it shows that like, this is what we tried to do. And at some point, you're either gonna shrink the building, you're gonna change the shape, it's either gonna blow the budget, right? Because now it's not a simple rectangle, now it's something crazy, and, you know, or it's the footprint is too small, the space doesn't work for what you're trying to attain, right? And then that's where you could try and come back into this setback area and say like, well, this is what we need to really, if we're gonna do this at all, to make this practical and to spend our money, this is what we need to ask for. But, and maybe that is exactly what you have, and maybe that is it. And if that's it, okay.
So, and to confirm, we have done a whole bunch of that.
Okay.
And I'm,
I know you kind
and I'd
of,
be happy to talk, but I guess you probably don't want me to talk that long tonight. So, and definitely, you know, why the siting is proposed? Well, definitely it came back to the operations of 4 local businesses, not just North House Folk School. You know, how is food delivered to the back door of the Fisherman's Daughter? How is food delivered to the Angry Trout Restaurant? How is fish taken away from North Superior Fisheries? It's through this driveway and it's with vehicles. And so we positioned so we looked at how could we position the building to help make those businesses, all of those businesses, as efficient as possible. And clearly, if we need to be sent back to the drawing board, that's again, that's part of what we're here for. So, yeah, and I'd be, so.
Yeah, okay. So it sounds to me like maybe the deal would be, if you are still interested in going forward, which I'm sure you are, would be to maybe come back with something more for us to see those iterations and to really be able for us to finish out, like I was saying, with our findings, you know, because that's the one piece that's hard to always figure out, is the plight of the landowner. Like, how is that so? We can see what you want, and it makes sense with everything else, and, you know, pretty much all the other pieces of the variance kind of fall into place. But it, you know, as we've heard you talk about it and as we've thought about it more, and I'm so grateful that Anton is here now with your perspective on this. It really it really would be important for us to see those pieces. And I think maybe tabling this to our next planning and zoning would be the best plan of action going forward. I think we have enough time. I don't think you need to pull back your request. I think we'll have another planning and zoning in just a few weeks. So,
And I was looking up on the League of Minnesota Cities, we can, if it comes to it, extend that another 60 days.
okay, all right, so we're good. We're well within time. If that works.
Well,
within-
yeah, go ahead.
Go.
I was just gonna say, I wouldn't, I think that, I don't know where you guys are at for sure, and anybody,
Right.
but I would assume that if we called the vote and it was tied, then I don't know what happens in that case, because there's only 4 of us.
Right.
Or-
we just keep.
you know what I mean?
We do
Doesn't
rock,
Matt
paper,
get to vote
scissors.
then?
Yeah.
Joking, they're joking.
Patrick's
Well, I
the wild-
imagine it
Patrick's
probably
the
just
wild
gets
card.
sent to city council and they go, well, why is it a split vote, and
Right.
send it back.
And so that's, I think, and I don't know, if I don't know if there's any other points or things that either of you want to see. That to me is what I want to see. I kind of want to see, and maybe it's just because I like this kind of stuff, like,
Right.
I'm interested in what that is. Like, I want to feel comfortable with what is that, burden. And if it means I have to walk around with you guys, or you have, Bruce can send a couple emails of different layouts and options, like, maybe that's all it takes for me to say, like, okay, then that seems like that's what it is, right?
Right.
But I don't know if that's helpful for Stacy, if it's helpful for you and Ben
Yeah.
to see
I mean,
that as well.
I feel like for myself, it would certainly be helpful, because that's a good point, and like I said, that is the piece that always catches us when or me for sure, when we're doing variances. It's like, how is this not your fault? How is this a burden that we're all gonna share in now? So seeing that process of, like, here are the iterations that we tried. We've tried this, 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 and this, and here's why we ended up with what we ended up with. And considering, that we do have time to come back and talk about this again, I think that might be the best way to go, because from what I'm getting, it seems like there's enough hesitation that it seems like it'd be worth it to come back again and talk again and have some more information and be able to run these things over. And for anybody who would want to, I assume we can probably get with you and walk the land and all that kind of thing.
Okay.
So that's what I would propose. I don't know if I need to make a motion for that, but.
But I think it's better to table and ask for more information than it would be to vote, and if it got voted down, then the variance is denied and they have to start all over again, right?
Right. Sometimes it's better to do it that way, but I think in this case, it's better to come back.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just at the little bit more of the process would make me feel more comfortable. Again, not necessarily like, what does this open up for future asks, but for this particular piece of property, again, because I do think most everything that you have is right there, but I think it's just that question for me is the holdup. And I don't see anything, and even in the renderings that are there, that makes me, I know that it'll be done well if LHB is working on it, and, the
Yeah.
style, the fit, all of that. Again, not that we need to approve the siding color, but, that kind of idea of it fitting in with the character and the kind of working aspect of the harbor. But I think I'd just feel more comfortable
Right.
being able to look at those,
And,
the process a little more.
and just, I think, that the big things are looking at that deck and looking at that distance and thinking about that a little more. I think that just to give you some area that I think we would all agree, that's probably an area that we feel the most hesitant about.
Okay. And anything else, Stacy or Ben? Things that you're hoping?
No,
we
I
would
don't,
come back and be
I
able
think
to
that makes
address?
a lot of sense. I have to think a little bit more about it. Yeah, I don't want to, take apart what you've done, right? Because it is good, and a lot of the things that you're saying and the technologies and the pavers that you're implementing are above and beyond, right? So, like from that aspect, it's very positive. But man, that's close to the water, and you know we're not bumping it by a small margin. You know, we're blowing it up. So. I'm not worried about down the road because we can have this conversation with the next person down the road about why they're blowing up the vegetation line or the high water line or whatever it is for the next variance request. But in this particular example, yeah, maybe seeing some other renderings that's like, hey, we tried to fit this building within the setback. We tried, and it didn't work for this, and this, right? Or, nah, it's just we wanted more space, or nah, we just figured we're gonna go for the gusto, right? We just wanted everything and just take the temperature of the board and see what happens, right? And that's okay, if that's what happened, fine. I think you got it, you know, I think we know that that's probably not what we want, but, and maybe more information and more conversation, and, yeah, the renderings are good, though, you know, the effort is there, for sure.
And it's a nice looking building. I mean, you guys do a good job. But my first question, okay, you can't put it here because you want trucks to come in. But you do have 2 other properties. So if you need more space, why can't you utilize other properties without impacting the shoreline?
Gotcha.
Was my very first question. But I didn't ask that, did I?
Well, and one thing I would like to point out to us, the commissioners, is that, again, certainly when North House took over that property, it is not an unreasonable thing to ask to do that in that space. It's like, yeah, you know, because there are other buildings there that already are in that space.
Don't have a problem with asking.
Yeah, and I'm just
Don't
saying,
have a
like,
problem with that.
there's no, yeah. So just making sure that we're all, like,
Yeah.
aware that, you know, this is a give and take, and we're going to work on this. All right.
Thank you.
Say we are adjourned with
Thanks a
that.
lot, you
Yep.
guys.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Conversation.
April 6th. Is that your question?
You're right in my line. See you April 6th.
All right, so then.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce.
He gone.
Yeah, Bruce. Moving on
He
to
bills
other
by the hour, it's
business.
better he's gone now.
So Stacy, I bet you're excited to see the information we got here. Now, we're just going to get a presentation today. We're actually going to talk about it another day.
Okay.
Because I was
Well, that's
feeling like you were feeling, I know I was.
Well, actually, when I got at 4:15 and saw the email that I got more information, I was like, really? They expect me to learn this in the next 15 minutes? It's not happening.
Sandbagging.
Yeah, nope, we're going to get a presentation and then we get to talk about it next time. And really, I'm so hopeful for this piece because it's been a long time we've been working on this.
Let's do it.
All right.
Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Jeff.
Hello, can you hear me?
We certainly can.
Great. I heard you guys were a quick study, that's why you got it right at the last minute.
That's a different committee.
That's the PUC.
Well, glad to see you guys again. I'll give you the presentation that we put together. It's pretty short, I think pretty straightforward, to help you be ready to answer some of those questions in 2 weeks, I guess. So for those, I think I've met everybody. I'm Jeff Miller. I'm a planner with HKGI and worked with this group a lot about 2 years ago. So, so anyway, the commercial industrial zoning district. I'll share a PowerPoint. Just to work.
We can see your screen now.
Does that work?
Yep, we can see it now.
Great. Let's see, I'll go to. Well, we'll just go with this. So I'm going to slideshow version, doesn't seem like. All right, so the purpose of the study is to determine how new housing development could occur on land currently in the CI zoning district. And the scope of the project is to analyze the uses that are currently there and that are allowed there. Research some other places that have similar issues, get input from people in the district that are located in the district, and then evaluate alternatives for updating the ordinance or updating the zoning of properties that are currently in that district. Some of the basics of the district, and you probably know the district pretty well. It sounds like you're interested in trying to change it. So today it allows a wide variety of commercial and then some industrial uses. As you probably know, the BDA district actually allows a lot more industrial districts, I would say, or industrial uses. Housing uses are not allowed, with the exception of a couple things as conditional uses. So that those two things there, it's either things that were there before, and so you can improve them through a conditional use. And then through a conditional use, you could actually build a new single-family dwelling. And then due to the district's allowance of industrial and commercial, there's a lot of standards in that district, and Mike has tried to explain to me how that probably happened. And so, you know, there are other districts that actually refer to some of these standards that are in a different zoning district. So in a lot of places, we'd see these districts not actually located in the zoning district. They'd be in a separate section of the zoning code. The zoning map today, which has been updated pretty recently, about a month ago. So we're talking about this area here and this area here. So, you know, most properties have access from Highway 61. There's a few that don't have direct access, I guess. So what some of the options that we're considering with the study is, could portions or all of the CI district be rezoned to something else, like maybe H61? That's a mixed use district, and if you are looking at potentially adding residential to the CI district, that's making it a mixed use district. If that was a good option, it would require adding some additional residential uses to that district as well. Another option would be to rezone the industrial portions of the CI district to the BDA district. We'll talk about what's there today, but that would be, you know, not very many properties probably. Another option would be to amend the CI district and add residential uses, and then standards that are appropriate for residential uses. And then the last one is to amend the CI district to remove industrial uses, and that would prevent incompatible uses in the future between industrial and residential, if it was seeming like it was going to become more residential or primarily residential. So the findings so far that we've identified, and you know, we're open to any questions or ideas that you may have tonight and then in 2 weeks. So the first thing was, we felt there was a need for an existing land use map. So we started with the county's tax classification data, and then we tried to translate that into what are typical land use categories for a city. And I think that was in your recent packet that came out from Patrick, but I think he also printed a copy for you.
Yeah.
So that looks like that. So that's taken a bit of work. It's been really helpful to see though what is actually in the district. So we'll come back to that, or we'll go through that in detail. Industrial uses are pretty limited today. Of course, it depends on how you define industrial uses. You know, some cities would say, you know, the municipal garage is an industrial use, or MnDOT's facility. Sounds like there's what you might call firewood processing. You might call that industrial, you might not. A salvage yard, things like that. But there's not a lot of uses that probably would fall into the industrial use category. There's some quasi-industrial uses, some of those that I just talked about. But municipal uses, at a minimum, are allowed in any district in the city as essential services, and there's a separate section that does not lie in any specific district that allows essential uses. Residential uses, per that map that you have that shows existing land uses, there's 29 properties we found. That's about 30% of the district is residential today. And that's about 70 homes or residences. So that includes a wide variety of housing and density types. So there's obviously some single family units for homes. There's some duplexes, 3-unit, 4-unit, 6-unit, all the way up to 24 units on a lot. Not being up there while I was doing this work this year, 24 units seemed surprising to me, but you probably would know that that's the property on the east side of the city. It's not a 24-unit apartment building. It's 24 units on a lot. And then the map that we put together, that does show the number of housing units on each of those residential lots. So that should be really helpful for figuring out what we should do with the district. Lodging uses, they're classified in different ways by the county. So if you just look at the county's map, a couple of them, 3 of them come up as residential properties because there is a single family residential property on them. The Aspen Inn comes up as commercial. So we, on the map that you have, are classifying all the lodging uses as the same thing. Non-conforming uses, it's usually good not to create those and to reduce those if you can. Today, at a minimum, any housing uses that have more than 1 unit on a lot are non-conforming. There could be some other ones. Highway access, we recognize that the CI district, in theory, it's placed well, I would say. It's important that commercial and industrial uses have highway access. But another way to think about it is that highway access would also probably be a good amenity for higher density housing uses as well. And then finally, vacant land, we found that there's about 20% of the land in that district that's vacant today. And those lots are larger, so they could accommodate residential, probably better than even the residential district, because there's probably, my recollection is there's not a lot of larger lots in the R1 district. This is the map. So those findings that I just went over were related to existing land uses. As far as development standards, so all those standards that are in there, the performance standards are things like, they're basically nuisance things, so odors, noise, that sort of thing. Those are typically oriented to industrial uses, and as I said, there's not very many of those in this district. Screening, landscaping, lighting, storage. If residential is added to this district, we would need to evaluate whether and how these relate to housing. Screening, boundary line setback, buffer area. Those are kind of redundant, but there are 3 different ways that the current code, I would say, requires a minimum of 50-foot setback from any residential district. And a lot of the properties in this district are adjacent to a residential district. So that's that could be a potential barrier to getting housing built if you have to take out 50 feet off the side of the property that's next to residential, and you're building residential anyway. And then finally, vehicle and pedestrian circulation standards, like the previous standards, we need to review how they relate to housing. And then also, we should consider whether some of these standards could just be relocated outside the CI district, and specific uses in the district could just refer to those standards. So if there is an industrial use or an intense commercial use, they would be subject to those, but most uses would not be subject to those standards. I think that's it. So that the last page, I guess, of that memo was a series of questions, and those are the questions that we would like you to think about, and then we'll discuss those in 2 weeks. So with that,
Awesome.
if you have questions or thoughts, and just thoughts that you want to talk about tonight, we could do that. And of course, we'll have a full discussion in 2 weeks.
Yeah, so one question I had right off, Jeff, just wondering, can you tell me what percentage right now is actually commercial or industrial at this point?
We could, I can't, I don't have those numbers.
Yeah, I was
We could
just-
easily
I mean, I was
we could
kinda-
easily do that.
Yeah, I was just kind of like adding up what we had, and I'm like wondering how
Yeah,
much of
so-
this is even,
Yeah, combined, they should be about 50%, I guess,
okay,
because we're saying 20% vacant,
yep,
about 30% residential.
yeah, so it's got to be a little less than that. Okay,
Yeah, yeah, and that would include, municipal or public uses, so if it would be less than that, because if you say the fishery service is not industrial, it's not really commercial either, so,
right,
I would say commercial, industrial are not a huge percentage.
okay, great. Commissioners, any other questions? Well, I'm so grateful to have this, and I look forward to our next meeting for sure. That'll be great.
Great, I think there's a chance I'll be there in person.
Oh, even better.
That'd be nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right,
That
well,
would be awesome.
Thanks, Jeff.
yeah, thank you
Yep,
so much,
thanks.
Jeff.
All right,
Appreciate it.
see ya.
See ya.
See ya.
All right.
Can I ask a background question on, like, how did, where did this come? Like,
Oh,
where did
well-
this come from?
The biggest thing was Anna Hamilton coming to us and that not happening. And then we were both, well, all of us were basically frustrated with how that all turned, and just looking at more spaces where we can have residential, like what, like how are we going to be able to do this? And yes, there is the vast part of
The
Grand Marais.
residential that's not tapped,
Right,
the vast amounts of R1 zone that's not utilized.
right.
That's the frustrating part, but it seemed like,
But this one,
because this did come up and it blocked a potential sale of a property in town that was gonna be rezoned, but that 50-foot setback
yep,
Yeah.
became so problematic for the surrounding
Yeah.
properties
yep, for those owners.
that it needed to be addressed anyway, and so we're like, well, let's just look at the whole of commercial industrial, knowing that, on the west end of town, so much of it's vacant.
Yeah.
Would it be more attractive to those landowners if it had more possibility, would they be more motivated to sell that? Would they be interested in having
Yeah.
it rezoned? So that was the basis for why we're here.
Okay.
Yeah,
But whether it's gonna turn into anything productive or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
no, I mean, I consider this one of those 1%ers. It's just like, it's not the solve, but it's moving in the right direction.
Well,
I
just
feel.
even seeing the amount of yellow on this thing is
Right.
like,
Yeah.
Crazy.
That's eye-opening.
all right, so
That's
it's
interesting.
actually
Yeah.
already residential, right? So,
Yeah,
case closed.
yeah, it's like,
And they're getting
Just
by
change
without.
the setback then for the commercial,
Yeah,
right, or for
that-
the
that-
industrial.
right,
That's what
right.
I'm
And so
thinking.
even just
It's
from our
easy.
last
Right.
conversation, I think we wanted to protect the people who are already doing business there and then allow for residential, because that's, I think, what our town is asking for, and I think we can
Well,
do
and that's,
that.
so these people have this land in our commercial industrial that we don't know if they had it prior to it becoming commercial industrial
True.
or not. Or did they buy it and now they put they're using it as residential?
It's a permitted, well, by conditional use, right? It's-
Right,
Yeah, I
so
mean, they can do
we-
it. So somebody somewhere along the line said, yes, you can, or they were there ahead of time.
Because I think
Because if there already was a
But-
residence, then
but-
they can keep being a residence.
So if they got a conditional use permit at some point by this group,
Yeah.
then these neighbors, do they know that they have a 50-foot setback? Or how does that work?
Yeah, I would be, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd be
'Cause that's
interested to know how much of
caused
that.
us to
But no, listen,
crash.
no, it's not zoned R1, right? So it's still,
Okay.
so it doesn't, that setback doesn't apply. So if,
That's
now,
right.
the reason that it was a problem for Hamilton
She
Habitat
wanted
is she
it
Because she
zoned
wanted,
rezoned
because
R1.
what she wanted to do with the property.
And
she
that
couldn't
changed
do.
the
That's
setbacks
where
from
the
the
big-
adjacent property.
Thanks, because that was
Yeah.
what was confusing.
Yeah,
to
because
me,
it was
yes.
that, because what she wanted to do is put the multiple residences in there instead of just one. She would be permitted to do the one, but she wanted to do multiple.
Yeah, so she could do them all through conditional use.
There was a problem with that, though.
It
Wasn't
was
there?
Don Eliason
Yeah,
said, now you're making my property having 50-foot setback,
right.
which is detrimental to, maybe someone purchasing it.
But I thought that was only
Yeah.
if it was rezoned.
Yeah.
If we
she
kept it
rezoned-
commercial,
If she could get the
She could have got a
conditional use
conditional use to do
permit, but she
residential
didn't want to
use.
do the conditional use.
That's right.
She
There
wanted the
must have been-
rezoning. That's
I
right.
can't-
That's where the
But I
difference
think
came
it,
in.
I think it had to do partially too with, you guys probably talked about it more than we did, but I think the size requirement of, that's this red skinny strip here, right? Right
Yeah.
next to the one on the
Yeah.
Gunflint, right?
Yeah,
So the difference, I think, is that there's also minimum lot size for commercial industrial for any sort of development. So if she were to keep it commercial industrial, but then
Yeah,
you'd
that's
have
what
to
I
do
thought.
some sort of like land, there would have been some other hoop of like land trust stuff where all of it is on the same land. I think that was part of the, you couldn't break it up into like
There-
4 lots and put
Right.
4 houses
There were
under a
lots of
conditional.
potential problems with it, and it was recognized by both Roth and the Hamiltons that they were going to be before the board several more times,
Yeah.
talking about variances, because of those issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
And that they were unsure if they could even fit the number of,
right. It was,
Units
it was
on there.
tight even if it could have gone through.
yeah, because they wanted to use the existing road, of course, that went
Yeah.
right through the center of the property, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all wetlands and.
like the rest of Grand Marais, apparently.
Right.
Yeah.
But, yeah, at least these ones on 61, I mean, they're all kind of set up for development. But,
Well, it is kind of it's the simple, it's an easier opportunity, and it is interesting seeing this. I know like the conversation that the council had with the EDA brought forward, the change of the rezoning in the business park to allow residential, that conversation of, which I'll throw out here since it's my first time being here, like somebody sometime had the ability and wasn't afraid to go through all the wetland work, the stormwater work, the infrastructure, the funding to build the business park for what was deemed a necessity when that happened to do that, right? And now, thankfully, we're really close to having all those lots sold, but that's been a long time coming. That's taken a long time, 20 plus. I've been here for 20 years, and that was here when I got here, so.
It's 2008.
Oh, is it really? Oh, I thought it was longer ago than that.
Feels longer
Seems
than
that-
that.
Feels longer. So,
It was a fiasco
but,
at the beginning.
but you look at, that was one of the things I brought up in that conversation in the meeting. It's like, where is the
that same sort of-
city, county, school dedication? If every single conversation always comes back to housing, every single thing, it's like, why are we not? Like, there seems to be a general thing of like, well, the city doesn't want to push infrastructure, the city doesn't want, it's super expensive, and it's like,
Well, how
really?
expensive?
Like,
Right? It's like,
we did it, we put infrastructure in at the business park, where there was that wasn't cheap. and it didn't go so hot, if I remember that, as far as how it all went
And
down.
it's potentially rolling back into that bordering on residential use again anyway.
Yeah,
right?
which to me is, that's my issue with that.
Yeah.
With that was like, it's like, well, yeah, there's utilities there, and yeah, like, you could, it's the cheapest land in Cook County to buy one of those lots.
Yeah.
Intentionally though, right? Like it
But-
was,
But
Left to
it's
front.
it's only the cheapest because it's basically being sold for like what the bond payment, you know what I mean? That its share of the bond payment
yeah, it's
is,
deflated, right?
it's so,
yeah.
so not like real.
Market,
Yeah.
right.
And so that would be something that I've got, well, I'll be here for a year or two, I guess, even after I'm done with city council. But like, that would be my encouragement, if I can try and do anything on this, would be to like, what does that mean? We've done studies, we've done on the need, like, it's clear,
Yeah.
talk to anybody, we know it's there. Why can't we have this conversation about, you know, I don't even care, I don't care, I mean, look, this study, I mean, we can go very quickly and look and see where there's real, pretty simple tracts of property that could be developed, and it's like, yep, but guess what? If it's a private person, which is the pushback that we'd likely get, is that, well, it's wet. So that means, you know, which if in the private entity's hands, like, that is a super huge burden to have to do that. And
Yeah.
the way that, I mean, these things have been platted, like the Blackwell edition, the stuff up north side of the Gunflint, I mean, that was 1912, like, those 40-foot lots have been platted since, I mean, it's been 110 years. Like, they've been platted for a long time. Like, that, I guess my point is like, we're not, we have opportunity, I think, to work with the school, who owns the vast majority of that property up there. And to, I mean, I look at that, there's other spots on the north side of 4th, between 7th and 4th, over on like 9th, 10th, 11th,
Yeah.
where you know, potentially things could be run up through there. But as a private individual, it's a terrible situation to try and, even if you bought a city block, you're basically giving, and you say you're gonna pay for it, you're giving the guy or the lady on the other side of the street
That's right.
free access to sewer, water, and
Yep.
a road, and now you still don't have access to the other side. So if you want to actually develop a city block that you own,
You'd do
you have
it
to
for your
pay for
neighbor.
2 city blocks worth of
Right.
property, and now the people on the other side of the street, now their property values just went from what is a $40,000 for a city block because it's wet and it's
Right.
unbuildable, to now, like, now I've got 10 lots on street frontage, which fits our minimum standard size for R1,
Yeah.
and, you know, I mean, it's crazy.
So are you working with the Public Utility Commission to say, we
I'm not
need to
on the
get this
Public
done?
Utility Commission.
We need
There's an
to
opening,
get
but I don't
this
think I could
done,
be on
and
that.
there's ways, we can put assessments on also to help pay for it. There is nothing wrong
Yeah, and they
with
would be.
I know, but
bonding or
Well, the
paying for this
conversation
over a.
it has to, you can't stop when you say wetland, right? Like, like,
well,
that's
it
the
can't
point.
stop, I mean, it also, like, I have asked, like, to have the city put infrastructure in and assess property that I own, and there's no interest in doing it. And the conversation, I was talking to Ben the other day, it's like, if the city did it, I'm sure it would actually cost more than if I were to hire somebody to do it, just because the city projects probably cost more. But then I don't have to pay for that, which is expensive, right? Which is then just gonna potentially slow down any sort of actual build out of homes, right? Or, and if the city does it and I get hit with a 25,000 or 30,000 or 50, whatever that number is, assessment on each one of my properties, I don't wanna have to pay that. So my goal would be to hurry up and
And
turn over
sell
and
it.
build and sell those houses.
Yes.
Which would,
Yep.
right? Which versus the other way of, okay, I have to pay for this. Okay, well, okay, I can do that. But then I also, you know, then now you have a road and you have utilities and you have those things which you're just gonna grant back over to the city so they can take, we've had this
Yes,
conversation.
we.
So, I just think that it's not cheap, but like there's it's not, and I don't, but I think that there are certain areas where it is, there's disconnect. Years ago, when they redid some culverts on 7, like, there's so many issues of where ditches, back when you could put ditches in to keep water. I mean, the reason, the ditch, the city ditch above the football field, I mean, if that was up 3 more blocks up, all of Creechville would be just as nice as the rest of town as far as like being buildable. But it's not, because where town proper was at that time was where it is, the airport as the school was and all that stuff. And I guess I just have a hard time with the development then that's happened with, there seems to be a disconnect between work that's done. There was something, actually, I think it was a tie over, wasn't that rock line ditch on 2nd Avenue West put in as part of like something with the business park and KGM? Remember that? That rock line ditch on the north side of the Gunflint Trail that kind of connects 9th Street down to the city ditch, right? Well, that got put in, and the elevation is off, and it takes all the water and dumps it right back onto my property. So now instead of 5% wetland, it's like 65% wetland. That's not my fault. But it's like, so there's these things that happen. I mean, you look at that section above 4th Street, that's all wet. Well, the reason it's all wet above 4th Street is because when the county came through and put new culverts in underneath 7, they just dumped them right onto those properties, and 4th Street was forever this like, oh, we got extra overburden, we're just gonna dump it and keep pushing 4th Street out. There's no culverts, there's no system. So of course, if you put a dam across a hillside, which is what the whole slope is towards town,
Right.
if you put, that's the same thing with 2nd Street is the same way.
Well, it doesn't take, you can look at the grade difference from, 7th, or County Road 7 to Highway 61 and know there's slope there.
Right.
That would provide excellent natural drainage, right?
Right.
So if there's a reason that you've got excess wet property, you've done something to preserve that, right?
And the problem is oftentimes is it isn't necessarily the landowner that's done anything
No.
to make their property wet. It's just, and it's not even like people right now doing things that are wrong. It's like these past things, or like, collapsed culverts on 2nd Street that came through, and like, where they built the EDA, built the all the housing there. That's between 2nd and 3rd?
That's,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, so 3rd, actually, that's like a little kind of trail
Yep.
going out. That was Main Street. That was like supposed to be the main street in town back when everything got platted. That's why the lots are all funnily oriented there.
Is that directly
So
north of
why?
Homestead?
That's why
Yes.
there's all those 25 and 20
Yeah.
foot lots that run 100 foot deep there, right?
Yep.
On 3rd. So
Not a culvert
if
through
you
there.
go on there are, but they're collapsed. So if you go on the south side of it, where it's actually managed right, that the reason they picked that to build was because there is wetland through there, but it's you can see on the satellite, you can see the spruce like where like it's wet and like where those natural drainages came through. But on the north side of that old road bed where those culverts have collapsed, look at that on the satellite image. There's like 4 like evergreen trees, like coniferous trees. The rest is just like alder. And it's because it's just that old road bed has just dammed everything up all the way up to 7, over the course of 50 years. And now it's like, oh, we can't touch that, because now it's like, I don't think anybody, again, going back to this conversation with North House, the idea isn't like, the way it's being solved is just, it's not being solved. It's just being left to be like unproductive. Like, we can manage it, like we have stormwater for a reason, and we have catchment basins, we have rain gardens, we have all these things in place within all the different entities that regulate it, right? But to put that onus on, like, oh, why, if the market's so strong, why doesn't private developers just take off and do it? It's because of
Those costs.
these historical mistakes that are now being like put onto the people that want to try and do anything. Whereas the city has, I think, the finances, it has the resources as far as being able to like get deed,
leverage.
get IRRR,
Yeah.
it'd be able to like use those entities and those things to be able to really push that forward.
So how do we get the city
Well, and the
council
county,
to do
right?
this?
The county as well.
Well,
I know
I mean, I think the you know, hopefully with the new, what is it, not,
HRA.
yeah.
No, but wait a minute.
Because we need, I think with the city council, or with the city, I mean, it's really being able to leverage the funds. I mean, we don't actually have the funds,
But
but
the-
we can leverage the
It's
funds.
city property.
But we-
And you're waiting for the county
But how do we do
to
it?
do the work and make the things happen.
But how
And
do-
I'm like,
I'm not.
we kind of need the city to step up and
But
say,
what I'm wondering
hey,
is,
we're willing to
that's the question I
invest
had,
here.
is like, how did it happen for the business park? Like, how did that happen? Like, how did that come to be, even if it was messy and whatever? Like, what was that, process of, like, the order of operation at which that, like, became this thing where we need this, right, which we agree we need for housing, and then the development plan and the, you know, joint powers agreements and all those things. And I don't know if we have to, and maybe the HRA will be helpful, but I hope it is. But like, to me, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's, you know, the issue is it isn't like the city owns, right, 20 blocks of residential land where the city could say, okay, fine, we're gonna push this through our land, and then we're gonna, you know, sell it, right, at market value, because then it's like, sweet. But if we're doing it on school land, right, but again, the school, in order for the school to survive, they need to have places for teachers to live, and they need to have places for families to live to keep graduating classes up so the school stays strong and vibrant, right? So I feel like there would be some sort of ability to communicate with those, but I don't know I don't know how that conversation gets started, other than like, man, we really need housing.
I don't remember if it was a combination of city and county land,
Okay,
the business park, and the impetus really came through the EDA. We needed this place for businesses, and it was first designed. Most of those lots were sold.
Yeah.
Then, of course, 2008 hit. So people backed out. Some of them passed away. There was a whole number of things of why those lots people backed out of.
yeah.
And then we have what we have now. I know my dad lives at Homestead, and he will also tell you about 3rd Street and how the culvert's not orientated correctly in the creek bed, and they have water
Down.
coming through their parking lot, and
Right.
the parking lot is actually sinking
Yeah.
where the water is running through there and under their building.
Yeah,
And he's had Soil and Water come and look at it, and they had no solutions for him. And it's not just the city, because the county land services get involved with the wetland stuff.
right.
Right.
But I
So-
think that, yes, I think it's, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing out there, like, this is why I'm like, yeah, I want to be here, because I think, like, I'm hoping that at this level, because, like, I feel like, at least in the first couple of years, I kept talking about this on city council, and it was just like, the city doesn't want to push infrastructure. That's what I kept getting.
Well, we need to push infrastructure, and
Oh, yeah.
Wanna
And
know
I just feel like
if
now
we
is
have
the
two
time. I mean,
counselors
now
that can't push
everybody's
it,
talking about
but
it.
how can we make this happen? We can't do anything without infrastructure. Our
Right.
HRA isn't gonna make anything happen in Grand Marais.
Well-
If Grand Marais doesn't get behind and say, yes, we're willing to invest in
And maybe that's
infrastructure.
just all that they need to hear, is that, like, you know, I mean, because ultimately it is, I can't speak for other counselors, but like, basically, I don't know anybody that's in any elected position, from whatever it is, from school board to city council to county commissioner to even being on the, whatever it is, soil and water conservation district. I cannot think of a single person who is serving in the community up here who doesn't think that it's a valuable place to put money and time to,
Yeah.
you know, and the city is the place that it has to happen. Like, everybody has their dream of a 20-acre parcel, but just do it later. Like, if you want to try and solve housing, like, density is the solution, and that means a combination of single-family, multi-housing. I think the zoning changes that you guys did and that the council approved, like, I think are really big steps in helping that along.
Yeah.
But I think that next step then having that stuff cleaned up and much easier is really this, like, I think that there needs to be that the push on our end that we're interested. And I don't know what that means, right? I mean,
So some of the barriers are, we don't have unlimited money.
Right,
We also have aging infrastructure that needs to be redone.
right.
Fifth Avenue West, First Street from the library out to 11th. So
Right.
some of those priorities of fixing what needs to be fixed before you open up more
Yeah.
is
Although-
part
I
of
don't
it.
think-
There needs to be some sort of formal program or something from the city, right? I mean, just some acknowledgement that, yeah, we want to support these developments, right? We want to get creative and help people navigate that at a private level, because it isn't going to get done on its own. And how many
No.
people have to sit and study it and stare at it? I
I mean,
mean,
we-
100, 200,
Yeah.
250.
250? Is that the sweet spot? Like,
That's
because
the
I'm pretty
breakdown.
sure we got
So
250
we're almost
looking at
there.
it now, you know, like,
We're so close.
I think that, I mean, that's really true, and I think like that, I mean, on the kind of our priority meetings that we have, like, I think are really helpful for us to be able to understand what capacities are existing within we know that we have capacities. We know that the 61 project was huge, right, as far as both water delivery and as far as like sewer extraction, and stormwater. I feel like those kind of, like, it makes sense to address some of these literal downhill issues, right, to make sure that anything we do upstream is not going into a failed system. I think it's hard I'm not disputing anything you say at all, Kim. I think it's accurate. I think it's like, when is Fifth Avenue gonna happen?
2023.
Okay, so that's good. I mean, that's good, because it has been several years of conversation about that, and I know all this, like, not that if we do this, it's still like, we're not gonna be serving here by the time it actually happens.
Right.
Which
But
is
it's
why I think
important
it's
to
even
get-
more important to, like,
Yeah.
we gotta go.
But we need the direction from the city council at this board level, right? It's like, hey, start looking at some options, right? Or start figuring out.
Well, I
how
think
does
that
this,
is,
you know,
partly what, I mean, it goes back and forth. I mean, we can bring it to the council too. It can go that way too.
Well,
And we
we've
can
got
say, like, because we've already-
R1, but we can't do anything with it because there's no infrastructure. So it's kind of
Right.
like,
well, maybe
we
need to
keep
study that
saying,
then, you know,
you
figure
gotta
it
tell the
out.
public utilities, come up with a plan. Yes, take care of, fix what you
I mean,
need.
because
I get
it's
that.
zoned correctly.
But you gotta
But we
get
need the infrastructure
you
in
gotta
there.
get the infrastructure there so we can do something with it
Yeah.
and make sure we get homes on it.
I think
Yeah.
I think you're right, like First, right, you said First out to, like, First is a big project, Fifth Avenue West is a big project. And I think, like, looking at, so like, we look at the way they kind of have things staggered off, right? So it's not like everything, there's some stuff that's really bad, there's stuff that's kind of halfway through, and there's stuff that's new. So it's this idea that, because a lot of communities, like, if everything kind of was built at the same time, like, they're realizing everything is failing at the same time, and like how absolutely screwed they are. Like, it's kind of nice how we have stuff
Yep.
staggered out in that kind of replacement schedule, which obviously costs money. And, it isn't, I don't know, but it's a staggering amount of, we have the protections for the R1 zone from like nightly rentals, right? So we have this idea that, like, if people want to live here and people want to be here, because of all these other steps that have taken place, like, if we could if we could find locations where it's like, we're gonna do a block and then that's gonna be opened up, or it's, two sides of a block or
what
whatever.
you're saying.
And you kind of have this
Yeah.
ability to kind of tie in and go up, and there is an overall plan, like that to me is, it almost seems like a no-brainer, because it is expensive, but
Right.
there is gonna be, like, what's the
But if the
tax,
city
what's
owns
the
that
taxable, what's
infrastructure-
the taxable value
Right,
Yeah.
but
of
the
that
city can
property?
sell connections to that, right? I mean, it's, if the city owns that, whereas a private person, like you say, if I run, sewer and water up, from Homestead, and then all of a sudden I've got my neighbor who's plug it in for nothing, right?
Right.
Well, that isn't gonna work very well for me, whereas if the city owns that.
Well, that's where I look at like that stuff on the north side of the Gunflint, right? There's a lot of, in that Blackwell addition, there's a lot of R1 zone up there.
Yeah,
And if you look at those sections, the ability, I mean, does the school pay property taxes? I should probably know this. Okay, so there is 0 taxes coming in on that. So if that, and if they could actually sell that, like, that's great for the school too, right? If the city says, like, this is totally hypothetical, the city says, fine, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna actually assess the school this, so those assessments could get passed on, because the school doesn't want a bunch of land with city and water, or sewer and water to it. So they can sell those lots with the assessments,
Yeah.
right, or satisfy
and
the
the special
assessments when they
taxes and all
sell
that
them.
stuff, right, yeah.
Then it's this, I mean, there's only so much of it, but I just think that we don't, what, they're, $50,000-$60,000 per lot, that's 10 per side of the street. I mean, at the low side, 50, it's $1 million of, like, potential, like, that's just taxable land value just on one run for one block to hit both sides of the street. So that's before you put a house on it.
You should present this to the council.
Yes, would you please?
Do I have to get on the agenda or something for that?
Have you guys already had your priority meeting? Or you want to adjourn this
Call
one?
this adjourned.
Are they nice?
I'm glad you're here, Mr. Anton.
Did you guys have your priority meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, well.
Not this
Not
year,
this-
but.
Where was housing